is in understanding that the Lord desires that we would provide in our midst and in His sight a visible difference between our covenant children and the world. That's the language of the confession, a visible difference between the church and the world. And if that seems a little obscure to us, we can think of that analogy by way of a couple other analogies. When we are growing up, depending on what household we're growing up, there's a pretty good chance that at some point someone in your family dressed you up in a team jersey. So if you're an Ole Miss fan, you can bet that someone's wearing an Ole Miss jersey by the time they're about 3 weeks old. Mizzou fan, Cardinals fan, Blues fan, and this is just one of the ways that as parents we corrupt our children, depending on what on what team we begin to shape their affections with. I've had the uncanny ability of shaping my kids' affections with teams that don't win, so we share our misery together. But that's part of what we do as parents. That's kind of a fun analogy, but there's something really true about the fact when you grow up wearing that jersey, your heart begins to get attached with a sense of loyalty to that team. It's inherited in that sense. Maybe another analogy would be the names that we are given. In just a moment, we're going to baptize Ada Rector. And Rector is a family name for the Novicels. It's Evelyn's maiden name, as a matter of fact. And I'm sure, with the amount of kids we have on the lawn right now, there's a story behind your name. And there may even be a long line of people behind your name, if it's a family name. Well, why do we do that? Why do we take family names out of our family tree and apply them to our children? Well, sometimes we just like the sound of the name, but I think there's more going on. As human beings, I think what's going on is I think we recognize the way in which names and legacies and stories are deeply formative for us. They shape our identity. And so maybe sometimes when our kids are walking out the door on the way to school, we might say, hey, remember your name. Remember who you are. Remember who you represent. And that's not meant to be a shaming statement. It's meant to be a formative statement, that our behavior would be shaped by our identity. Well, baptism is doing something similar. It's saying to our covenant children, even before they know what's happening to them, we are placing a name upon you. We are setting you apart, visibly set apart from the world, so that you might live a life that reflects the name you bear. And so when we baptize Ada, we are saying to her and to her parents, our prayer for this little one is she would grow up bearing the name of the Lord before the watching world. And that is a high calling, to be a baptized one, to have your very identity shaped by the name and the work and the love and the mercy of a living God. Now, this doesn't guarantee that our children grow up to live up to that name, and yet what it says is that baptism is primarily about God's promise to us, not our promise to Him. And in this way, this practice is deeply formative for us. There's a reason we're doing this in public together in the middle of worship, because this is now your chance, baptized ones, to reflect on your own baptism. There's a good chance you don't remember it. Maybe you do. But even if you don't, you have a chance to reflect on the fact that you have been loved. Long before you loved God, God loved you. Long before you knew Him, He knew you. We'll be able to say to Ada years from now, on that day you were baptized, you were set apart as a holy one. On that day, the Lord met us as a church, even as He met you. And He pledged Himself to you. And now your response is to respond to that grace. That's our prayer for her. That's my prayer for you, that even in this moment you reflect on the Lord's mercy.